What's happening, people? This is the Lions Roar vlog, and we are about to jump into the books of Adam and Eve. That's right. Some of you have never heard about them before, but I'm about to read them. They're a thing. They were on Earth. They found them things in the caves, just like they found the rest of the scriptures and scrolls and Dead Sea Scrolls and the Apocrypha, the hidden books, and all these things that those sacred, anointed, chosen people wrote. Yeah. They get a little different with the books of Adam and Eve because you have the church at large, in America at least, they don't like to push or talk about or speak about anything outside of the 66 that the English, decided to say, hey, we're going to say that this is the 66 and this is the 66 because we say it's the 66 and we don't care. Anyone fails, huh? You know, before them, the Vulgate, there's a few different texts, that had these books that the English took out, the Protestants took out. They were there because they were part of the original collection of scrolls that belonged to the Hebrews. They ain't belong to nobody else. Some of these scrolls were getting found in the caves. Some of these scrolls were getting found in Egypt, different places that was around these people. Without further ado, I'm gonna just go ahead and read the intro to the books of Adam and Eve, and then that's gonna give you the historical context that you need to know better than I ever can. And then we're just gonna jump into those chapters. And this is a reading response blog, so remember, I'm not. If there's things here that we both find out together, you're going to do your research as you should, and I'm going to do mine. I know I'm going to do mine. You should do yours as well. Let's go ahead and read the intro to the books of Adam and Eve. This is the first book of Adam and Eve. Present day controversy that rages around the authenticity of the scriptures and how human life began on this planet must pause to consider the Adam and Eve story. Remember, what we went through in the books, the first few chapters of Genesis, when we got to dealing with Adam and Eve. Adam meant first man. Eve means the mother of the living. Okay, that was not the names of the first people. That was just what we referred to them as. Okay, so. Where does it come from? What does it mean? The Adam and Eve story, right? Quote unquote. The familiar version in Genesis is not the source of this fundamental legend. It is not a spontaneous heaven-born account that sprang into place in the Old Testament. It is simply a version, unexcelled perhaps, but a version of a myth or belief or account handed down by word of mouth from generation to generation of mankind through the incoherent, unrecorded ages of man. It came like an inextinguishable ray of light that ties the time when human life began with the time when the human mind could express itself and the human hand could write. So in other words, it's saying, hey, they're saying, look, maybe it be a version of myth or belief. It was handed down from word of mouth, from generation. They're saying, look, it's on the earth. And they're not saying that it popped up because some Eurocentric culture wrote it and they wanted to, have their own thing going on. I guess dogma, if you will. No, they're basically saying these scrolls have their deep roots just like the rest of them do, because the only way we have the scriptures and the Apocrypha that people really dig into is because of the auditory, what it said right there. Auditory passing down, the recording, and from the point to where when it could be communicated and then written, because we have to understand these are the early humans. So at a certain point, we're gonna begin to evolve and remember and learn how to start documenting better. And once that happens, then all of the information from the beginning to the point of writing is going to be compiled. And we know that Moses, or Masha, if you will, was the one who penned the Torah. Moses, Aaron, those guys working together with the Spirit, okay? So this is not the most ancient story in the world. We're moving on. It has survived because it embodies the basic fact of human life, a fact that has not changed one iota. It still remains here to this day. Amid all the I just added that it still remains here to this day. Now, amid all the superficial changes of civilization's vivid array, this fact remains: the conflict of good and evil, the fight between man and the devil, quote unquote, devil in capitals there. So, the English, once you start putting the things like the devil in capitals, you know that the English are communicating something. It just is what it is, man. We're going to deal with these things for what they are, okay? The eternal struggle of human nature against sin, okay? That like this eternal struggle of human nature against sin, that the Adam and Eve story pervaded the thoughts of ancient writers is seen in the large number of versions that exist, or whose existence may be traced through the writings of Greeks, Syrians, Egyptians, Abyssinians, Hebrews, and other ancient peoples. As a lawyer might say, who examines such much apparently unrelated evidence, there must be something back of it. There must be something there. There's something there. The version which we give here is the work of unknown Egyptians. Now, here's a very interesting thing about when they say unknown Egyptians. Who was in Egypt for years before they left about that thing? Them Hebrews. So it's very interesting that they are saying like this is the work of unknown Egyptians. Moses, or Masha, if you will, would have known how to definitely write in Egyptian hieroglyphs, and Aaron would have been the one who was writing in Hebrew, because remember, Moses has lived as an Egyptian his entire life, so he would have had to have a very steep learning curve in writing these things down. Also remember that Moses was they say Moses kind of stammered, like he wasn't the most eloquent speaker. This is written. And so this is why Aaron was alongside of him to be a teacher and also to transcribe and document as well. Now, I believe Moses would have definitely been documenting in what he knew, even though he eventually probably did learn Hebrew. I imagine he did start learning some of it, but I believe Aaron was the one who was probably doing most of the writing. And then once Aaron died, because I think he died before Moses. I don't quote me on that because I don't remember specifically, but it probably would have just been handed on to Aaron's sons or someone else until Moses died. And then I'm pretty sure it was like Joshua and Caleb and like whoever was transcribing around those guys, because they end up being the leader after Moses, right? So it's very interesting that they say this Egyptians, they don't know who the author is, but the Hebrews are attached to Egypt, right? So that's very interesting. So let's keep moving. The lack of historical allusion makes it impossible to date the writing. Okay. Parts of this version are found in the Talmud and the Quran and elsewhere, showing what a vital role it played in the original literature of human wisdom. Now, when we get into talking about the Quran, I have never read the Talmud before, but I've heard about the Talmud. I don't really know the history, but I'm thinking that the history is more pertaining to the Middle Eastern way, as perhaps as they interacted with the spirit of the Most High and things that they had going on. I don't know. I didn't dip into the Talmud yet. I don't feel the spirit pushing me to. So maybe I will, just to do it because I love reading. I'm just a purveyor of knowledge anyway. But I do know that Quran, because of Ishmael, it has the Torah. Some of the accounts are very different. I would say that some of those accounts are very different simply because of the men who want to confuse the narrative in their own culture. So for instance, if the English don't want you knowing pieces of information because they want to gatekeep, because that's their culture. The Romans and the English are especially notorious for gatekeeping information or changing information to trick you. So if they didn't want certain pieces of information in front of you, then the works, the compilations that they translated and that they got their hands on, they changed some things. Or, and also, let me not say or, and also the Quran. Here's the other thing what you have with the Quran and the Muslim and the Middle Eastern cultures, because we know that Ishmael is the progenitor of them. Another thing you have going on with the Quran is the fact that once you have Muhammad and you have all these different deviations from them following the Hebrews way, because that's why the Torah is there. And once it deviates from the Torah and it starts going into other things, then you have to deal with the fact that the person or the people or the group or whatever, whoever penned the Quran, or however you want to say it, they were not plugging into the same trajectory arc as the Hebrews at a certain point. Because of that, if things were changed because whoever started changing things, let's say Muhammad went back and said, oh, we're going to, the spirit told me that this happened off of the planet. It happened in another planet or whatever. And he could be completely wrong. But he made it as canon in that particular compilation of the scriptures. Then we got to look at that. Like I've already said in the beginning videos in Genesis, I don't believe that the Garden of Eden was a literal physical earthly thing. But when you start reading these books of Adam and Eve, if you take it literal, you either got to take it literal or you really got to be breaking that stuff down to understand like what it's really communicating to you. Because once you start reading that, then it kind of gives a very different picture. And as I was looking at it earlier, I got to thinking like, well, here's the thing about that. What if it really truly was on like wherever that Garden of Eden, because Eden means beginnings. That's what you have to understand. So wherever that Garden of the beginning was, of course, it's probably going to be totally different than it's gonna be totally different than anything on the earth now. And when we get into the books of Adam and Eve right here, deep, like when I'm going to probably in the next video, because this is just going to be the intro. So when we get into chapter 1 and we get into chapter 2, and it starts talking about the transition from out of the garden into the earth, which has the sand and the rocks and all the different things, and they saw the difference, they became extremely distraught. That can kind of probably let you know that things were probably supposed to turn out a little bit different than they were. So when we're dealing with the accounts of the beginning, it can literally be like so outlandish to us, but it probably literally happened like that on a certain level. When we're dealing with these 300 years, 500 years, all these different times of these humans living, I'm wondering if there's a switch in the time, like the way we understand time and the way that they understand time. So for instance, my nephew was playing a racing game, and he had switched the miles per hour to kilometers per hour. And so he's driving this Corvette, and he's like, man, Uncle, look, I got the Corvette almost up to 300 miles per hour. And I look at it, I'm like, what? The Corvette to 300, the Veyron only goes 360 something, 260 something, and that's the super sport, that's the fastest car on land right now that I think you can buy is that Bugatti Veyron. It goes like 260 something miles per hour. It goes from like 0 to 60 in 2.5 seconds. It's a rocket. That's not, that car don't even go that fast. So anyhow, he had switched the miles per hour with kilometers per hour. So if there's a switch because of the culture deals with a different sort of a measurement different than we do, then we have to do research on how long was 100 years back then, because maybe it was different than what we understand here today. You understand? Which would make sense, even if the earth was spinning at a different rate. Like, let's just say the earth was spinning at a different rate earlier and back then. It could be anything. Who knows? But let's just say if the earth was spinning at a different rate, then 500 years is going to be totally different than 500 years today. Like, and let's just say, like, you still have to plug in that there are all these cultures, and there's all these different, like, when the by the time the English make their translation of the scriptures, there's already been translated into multiple. The Latin was one of the first, the Vulgate, I believe it probably was the first. Right there with, like, the I think it's an M word, the Mesoteric text. I think, so anyhow, like, you have all these different translations. So if the English pulled from different sources to sort of understand the original Hebrew, and then they look and they confirmed with other Eurocentric sources, let's just say, like, men have been ignorant forever, and let's just say that the men who run certain cultures and they get their hands on this information, let's just say, like, they change things ignorantly, and then the next thing you know, the cultures that come after them that pattern or that make translations based on what they did, because those cultures are of the same trajectory and they respect what those other European cultures did. So it's like now they're pulling information from a place of, like, it may not even be true. We may not even have the right information. But what we do know is that they were living for a long time, and it would make sense because they weren't eating how we're eating now. They weren't exposed to different diseases and sicknesses that we're exposed to. The earth is going to be totally different. Like, all the technology, all the things that would have been speeding the age, they're not there. Okay? So it makes sense that they would have lived longer. All right? So that's just a deep thing there. Okay, so the Egyptian author first wrote in Arabic, which may be taken as the original transcript, and found its way farther south and was translated into Ethiopic. Now, that's very interesting because Ethiopia is Africa back then. Here's what you need to understand. The entire continent of Africa, as it is now, was called Ethiopia back then. Lower and Upper Ethiopia. Literally the entire culture, the entire country, the entire continent. The entire continent. It wasn't split up. The entire continent was Lower and Upper Ethiopia. Okay, what you have to understand about that is that the queen, the leader, the Queen of Sheba of Ethiopia during the time when Solomon was living, she had a baby with Solomon. Solomon's first son was an Ethiopian, not Hebrew, not Jeroboam. Though he had a son before those two. They don't like dealing with that. Why? Because of who the Ethiopia is and how it plugs in. Okay. The fact that it goes south and it was translated into the Ethiopic, it means a lot because Ethiopia, they plugged into them scriptures and they respected it because of the Queen of Sheba. So just like it says up early at the top of, like, what I was just reading, here's what you have to understand. Once we are evolving and we're transcribing better and we have a more clear-cut understanding on the history, it's easier to write about it. It's easier to be more clear. It's easier to understand. And thus the information gets, transcribed and translated and all these different things. So that's why it's very important that the Ethiopians definitely wanted it too. So very interesting. Then when we get into reading this thing and you hear what's going on, then you're gonna have to deal with the fact that, like, let's just say, because you get those, like, I'm not gonna call them ignorant. Well, yeah, you get those, like, ignorant English type people who just don't want to have, like, they're like, if it wasn't the original part of the English 66, they don't want to hear it. But to ignore these things. But then all this history right here in the writing of the intro is letting you know there's all this history tied into it. All these different cultures knew about the Hebrews, wanted to know what was going on within it. And like what I was about to say, if somebody faked it, when you read the books of Adam and Eve, which I don't think they faked it, the spirit in me, I love the Most High. And I definitely pattern my own life to make sure that spirit can communicate to me whenever it wants to, can speak through me whenever it wants to, can speak to me whenever it wants to, and I can speak to it whenever I want to, and I can't force it to respond unless it wants to. Like, understand that. So at the end of the day, it's like, if you had someone fake it, when you read the books of Adam and Eve, why would they fake it and write what they wrote? think about why would they fake it and write what they wrote. When I get into it, you're gonna understand, like, dang, like this is a hard judgment. Men don't write hard judgments for themselves. That's my point. Like right now, I'm not even gonna go there because we're gonna keep this video moving. But men don't make hard judgments for themselves. That's part of the issue with accountability. That's why men don't like accountability, especially Americans. They hate accountability. So, they're not going to write hard judgments for themselves. So when you crack open the books of Adam and Eve and you see what it's saying, and you even see that it speaks about the Messiah coming, like, come on, man, it's there. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And then when you really think about it, like, how do they have all the information they have in Genesis and all of a sudden is nothing else? It doesn't make sense. Yeah, there is other things. There's definitely more. Right? They just hid it from people. Why? Because it's so potent and it's so powerful that if you really paid attention to it and you really start tapping in like you're supposed to, and you actually align like you're supposed to, not just be religious, but actually understand what's going on and actually understand that there is a power, there is a spirit that allows you to have life. Just yourselves, even you can't make yourselves stop doing what they're doing. They're doing it naturally. That's God. That's the spirit of the Most High, if you will. Because like I said, when we got into the book of Genesis, God and Lord, those were words that they used to refer to themselves. Those were titles that they used to refer to themselves. Those were labels that the English men used within their kingdom in their hierarchy. So when they got their hands on these precious scrolls from those people and they changed the name of the Most High, the energy of life, spirit, all there is, the highest one, the most sacred one that they didn't even want to profane, that the chosen ones never would profane the name of. Here they come along and they're going to call that precious name God or Lord. Man, get out of Dodge. Just like, do word studies, y'all. Now, I'm okay saying God or Lord. Here's why. Because there's many people who will come into my videos and that's what they understand. Eventually, they're going to understand more, but I'm okay with that because what are we talking about here? It's a code switch, just even with the language. This is exactly what I'm saying. So, if I say God or Lord, which I'm saying the Most High more than I'm saying that these days anyway, and there's even some like worship songs, gospel songs, inspirational type songs that I love, and it says God, Lord, I still sing that, but then there's certain times where I plug in Most High, and so yeah, that's part of it. So let's keep going because this is I want to hurry up and finish, and then this is almost done. This intro, so okay. And so the parts of the version are found in the Talmud, the Quran, and elsewhere, showing what a vital role it played in the original literature of human wisdom. So it played a vital role. These books were important to those ancient cultures. If they weren't important to the ignorant English and the ignorant Romans, so what? Who cares? They don't get the final say. They have lied about so much, they will never get the final say. It just is what it is. So it doesn't matter what they feel about the truth that's coming out. They can show up and try and cancel it and do all this stuff. They can't anymore. That's the whole point. So, for the present English translation, okay, we are indebted to Dr. S.C. Milan, Vicar of Broadwindsor, who worked from the Ethiopic edition, edited by Dr. E. Trump, that's 2 P's, professor at the University of Munich. Dr. Trump had the advantage of the Arabic original, which makes our bridge over the gap of many centuries a direct one. So here you have a guy who was able to take this Dr. Trump's, who had access to the Arabic original, and then this guy did the Ethiopic. So then he's making sure that it's all lining up, and they're looking at it and it's like, yo, this is lining up. So again, here you go. This is multiple. Now this is confirmation on confirmation of the work. Why don't the English want this thing in theirs? For the same reason they don't want the book of Enoch in there, for the same reason they don't want the book of Second Esdras in there. When you get into Second Esdras and it talks about specific things that are happening on the earth right now that you would have never read nowhere else in the scriptures, which actually you would have read in the scriptures, but would have been making reference to certain prophecies that the book of Second Esdras make it so plain to the point to where it's things that have happened only here presently, like within the last 8 years, that if you haven't been paying attention to, you wouldn't know. And if you would have never read the book of Second Esdras, which stands for Second Ezra, because Ezra wrote more than just what was in the 66 English, you would never know what was going on. It's like, I happen to know there are major prophecies being fulfilled on the planet right now because of Revelation, Daniel, and the book of Second Ezra from out of the Apocrypha, which I'm going to get into on this vlog too. So if you've never read that, stick around on the vlog. We're going to get into all of it that them Hebrews owned, all of it. From the Bible to the Kebra Nagast, which is the Ethiopian scriptures, how they tied into the Bible. That junk is interesting. We're going to get into that as Solomon and Sheba. When they meet, we're going to deviate and read the entire Kebra Nagast because that's where it came from. The Queen of Sheba and Solomon meeting, falling at, they loved each other. They were attracted to each other, and she fell in love with Solomon's wisdom. And Solomon say, hey, this is the Most High. This is how I got this wisdom. And she's like, what is this Most High? She becomes enamored with that, goes back to Ethiopia, which is Africa, like I said earlier, and the entire continent is Hebrew at that point. So you must understand this. That's why Haile Selassie, the Rastafarians, that's why when they say ja, there's no J in the language. It would have been ya, because it goes back to Yahweh. Like they followed the Most High. Why? Because Solomon's son Menelik, they followed that thing. And they are still engrafted into it to this very day. All the way connected from back then. That's why they say they kept that bloodline pure, right? So you got to look at them. You can't ignore them. A lot of people say, oh, where's the Messiah going to come from? The Messiah spirit is going to be in those who are on the level where it's supposed to be. The Revelation supports that. If you know how to read the prophecies of Revelation and you know how to break them down and you don't let it make you all feel all weird, and it's not an Armageddon doomsday scenario for the entire earth for you to be feeling like, oh my God, I'm just gonna burn with my family. And no, man, if you are ahead of these things, you're gonna get moved around it during the times where they're happening, and you better know what time you're living in, because if you don't, then when that stuff starts smacking earth, you're not gonna know what's going on. It's the truth. Anyhow, let me keep going. So this Dr. Trump had advantage of the Arabic original, which made our bridge over the gap of many centuries a direct one. So they're like, we could bring you even more clear information because this guy had access to one of the more original potent ones of the guy who really was closer to the information. So that's a powerful thing. The reading of these books is an adventure. You will find the mind of man fed by the passions, hopes, fears of new and strange, earthly existence rioting, unrestrained in the zest of self-expression. Let me reread that. You will find the mind of man fed by the passions, hopes, fears of new and strange earthly existence, rioting, unrestrained in the zest of self-expression. You roam in the realms of mythology, where swiftly the aspects of nature assume manifold personalities, and the amorphous instinct of sin takes on the grotesqueries of a visible devil. Did you hear that? We're going to read this one more time. And the amorphous instinct, the energy, the spirit. So then that right there tells you what the quote unquote devil is. Like I've always maintained, let mainstream media, wherever you are, tell you the devil is some red being with pitchfork and a tail that's sitting somewhere waiting to, get you. Or the devil is somewhere under the earth, like looking crazy and looking at his top. I can't wait to get out of here and go grab him up and eat him. Let's read one more time what this thing says. Okay, it says the amorphous instinct, amorphous meaning the ever-changing, the ever-shifting, shifty, deceptive, manipulative, The amorphous instinct of sin or these negative things takes on the grotesqueries of a visible devil. Okay? So now when we start talking about the devil and their interactions and all these different things and just, what's happening, you know, is this thing being given to us in a picturesque way to help us understand the fight between the natures? Maybe you never know. But I'm going to say this: the devil, quote unquote, because if it's the amorphous instinct of sin that takes on the grotesqueries of a visible devil, well then, like I've always said, the devils I see are the humans that's doing crazy stuff. That's all. That's the only place I've seen the devil in my entire life is in foul humans. Period. Where else is the devil on earth? In animals? Where else? In the good humans? Where else? In the water, in the fire, in the air, in the plants? Where else? But these foul-brained humans that run around here and want to make excuses for the things they do. They don't want to ever take any responsibility, have any accountability. That's the devil. From the top to the bottom, all the way around. And again, like I always say, I don't care whether you a street dude from the hood, or I don't care if you're a white politician in Washington, D.C., if you own some foul junk, and everybody in between from the janitor to the president of the United States, if you own some foul junk, you a devil. And then you know what's crazy is you get these people that want to like make excuses for where they're from. Like, oh, well, don't say that about the black people because we've been so messed up. How can you say that all these things are so messed up and all this different stuff, man? We so messed up, so really we should just be allowed to just, man, get out of here, bro. We are supposed to be the ones who are holding the earth accountable. Get out of here with that. Move left with that mentality. Those people are devils too, deceptive part of it. The little manipulative smile in your face and then talk about you behind your back and plot all sorts of stuff against you. Be trying to act like they like you so much. Devils. Why? Because, well, what does it say that the devil is? He's a father of lies. He's a liar. He's a deceiver. There's no truth in him. He's a destroyer. That's all he wants to do. That's all the energy wants to do. And that's what their energy be at. Think about it. So anyway, let's just keep moving. From such imaginative surroundings, you find yourself suddenly staring at commonplace, unvarnished events of family life. And such a family is the first earthly family was. So maybe when we're making reference to Adam and Eve, at a point we're making reference to the families. And maybe when they finally are laid to rest, it's the family. And they're with their progenitor laid to rest there. All of them. Or they could have literally been just living that long. And it's like, hey, just like Noah. Noah had his sons at like 500 something years. Hey, like I said, maybe it was a different time frame, but let's just keep moving. Okay. They all had the troubles, all had petty disagreements and taking sides with one another and the bother moving and staying with the baby. The mother moving and staying with the baby. I think maybe that's a typo. I don't know. Let's just read what it says. And the bother moving and staying with the baby, that in the total mark family life day to day. What? Okay, I'm going to read that one more time. That confused me. They had the troubles, all the petty disagreements, and the taking sides with one another. And the bother moving around and staying with the baby, okay, that in the total mark family life today, okay, so it's just like today, bro, what they're saying. You will see it when you peek beneath the overlaying glamour of tradition. One critic has said of this writing, this is, we believe, the greatest literary discovery that the world has known. Its effect upon contemporary thought in molding the judgment of the future generations is of incalculable value. The treasures of Tutankhamun's tomb, Tutankhamun's, okay, King Tut, so that's King Tut. tomb were no more precious to the Egyptologists than are these literary treasures to the world of scholarships. But we prefer to let the reader make his or her own exploration from his or her own opinion. The writing is arresting enough to inspire very original thoughts concerning it. In general, this account begins where the Genesis story of Adam and Eve leaves off. Thus, the two cannot be well compared. Here we have a new chapter, a sort of sequel to the other. Here is the story of the twin sisters of Cain and Abel. And it is notable that here the blame for the first murder is placed squarely at the door of a difference over woman. Okay? The plan. So again, like I said, how we know Cain killed his brother, but we don't have no other information? I think this is the information. The plan of these books is as follows. Book 1. The careers of Adam and Eve from the day they left Eden, their dwelling in the cave of treasures, their trials and temptations, Satan's or the devil's or that what it said, that essence that manifests, as the lower being in humans and the bad things they do, whatever. Satan's manifold apparitions to them, meaning many, like more than one. The birth of Cain, the birth of Abel and their twin sisters, Cain's love for his own twin sister, Luluwa, whom Adam and Eve wished to join to Abel, which probably is where our issue came in at, because that's why Cain was feeling some type of way. And like what I said in my, go back and listen to the books, the first 5 chapters in Genesis. We're going to jump back into Genesis after I finish the books of Adam and Eve. We're going to go back into where I left off, going into chapter 6 with Noah. Going into chapter 6 with Noah, because chapter 5, I'm not really going to read that much. But like I said, early humans, the early Hebrews, especially early Mesopotamians, they definitely were polygamous. They were told to grow within their cultures because they were called to be special. There was something written on their DNA that was different than the cultures at large. And that spirit and that energy, the DNA, communicated to them, do not mix with these outside cultures because they're going to change you. We want you to stay where you are. We need you to stay internal. So that's why here you're like, oh my gosh, look at this. Oh my gosh, his own sister and brother. You just have to understand the early cultures. That's what it was. And not only with the Hebrews, that was other cultures as well that were like that. Okay, polygamous cultures that were like that. Okay, so please understand, these early humans. Okay, very different. There wasn't no whole bunch of humans running around. All right. So the details of Cain's murder of his brother and Adam's sorrow and death. Book 2, the history of the patriarchs who lived before the flood, the dwelling of the children of Seth, which is Adam and Eve's sons. Remember, Seth came after Cain and Abel, and the sisters. The dwelling of the children of Seth on a holy mountain, Mount Hermon, until they were lured by Hinnon and by the daughters of Cain to come down from the mountain. Cain's death when slayed by Lamech the blind. Remember, Lamech is the one who kills him. And then Lamech says, hey, just like Cain, let there be a mark on me. Somebody come get me. They gonna suffer the same fate as Cain, because Lamech had killed Cain and he felt, there's all these different emotions around that. And the lives of other patriarchs until the birth of Noah. So like I told y'all, once I finish the books of, I'm glad that it said that right there, because once I finish the books of Adam and Eve, we're going to go ahead and jump into Noah, which is, we're going to move back into finishing Genesis. And then Genesis is going to be in that playlist. And then the books of Adam and Eve is going to be, everything's going to have its own playlist. So you can always go back and anything that you want to listen to, any book, any commentary, whatever, you can go back, you can find it, you can go directly to it. Without further ado, man, I'm going to go ahead and jump into chapter 1, but that's on the next video. Hit the subscription button, hit the notification bell. If you made it this far, share this information with somebody if you think they would like it. And yeah, let's go ahead and move this journey forward. Hui.